Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Babu's Frickin' Podcast. I am Mike Chiotti Ruby, joined as always on our Jedi Council by Grand Moff Mark Valentine, who has just returned from the danger zone. He has called the ball and landed safely back on the carrier. How was Maverick Top Gun for you, my friend?
Talk to me, Goose. It was a perfect 10 out of 10. Hot take, ready? Brian, I'm really sorry to do this. I enjoyed it more than I did Spider-Man.
Ooh.
That's a hot spicy.
Yeah, I'll match the spice on that. I said the same thing to Brian.
Spice.
I can't argue with it. I can't. I love them both. I love them both so much.
They had me at Danger Zone, Mike. The minute that they fired up Danger Zone on that aircraft carrier in the opening montage, I put money in the bank. Dude, I was already in.
They had me at the opening. It's not even an opening crawl. It doesn't even crawl like in Star Wars. It's just the opening text that was on screen with Harold Faltermeyer's bong. Ideal. And I think we're going to have to hold out for another great dogfighting movie until Rogue Squadron eventually makes its way to our Star Wars screens.
You mean if?
The last 40 something minutes of that movie reminded me of why I fell in love with cinema as a child. It was some of the most fun I think I've had at a movie in a long time. Just wanting to fist pump at the screen.
Well, if you want to hear some of us on the Jedi Council talking about Top Gun Maverick, Brian, you want to plug our guest spot when the two of us got to sit down and spend a good solid hour on the topic?
Yeah, we talked with Alex Klein over at Comics and Cinema. You can find that here on the Nerd Life Network. It was on May 30th? May 31st.
Yes, sir.
We were talking Top Gun Maverick with Alex Klein on Comics and Cinema. Also, anywhere you find your podcast, just search Comics & Cinema.
And that fine young gentleman who was just plugging another podcast was the other member of our Jedi Council, Brian Joe Yauzali. Brian, can you contain yourself? You've got the hometown team and your home team in the Stanley Cup Finals.
Yeah, I don't give a crap about the hometown team, but I
much for the Lightning.
I don't love Lightning. I don't love Lightning fans at all. But I was telling you before we went on, Mike, I just need to prevent myself from making a financially crippling decision to find my way to a Stanley Cup final game in Tampa.
Meanwhile, Mark and I'll crying our beers over the Rangers.
Yeah, I'm all cried out over all of my New York franchises, man. We are the Rangers were like the last hope for us. It's a barren landscape, man. Since you've moved west, it's been a barren sports landscape for us New Yorkers over here. It's bad. We're in the doldrums.
I'm just gonna bask in the warm glow of the Golden State Warriors.
The Yankees are really freaking good, though. The Yankees are really.
They should be good, man.
Well, yeah, but I mean, they're 43-16. They're really good
with their payroll. Okay, but lest we get off the topic and get into a whole other thing, which we got to do on Agents.
As all of our Star Wars listeners go, what am I listening to again?
As we got to get the New York Yankees traditionally do very well in the regular season, as they should. They have the highest payroll. They choke in the postseason. They don't have the role players that pull them through the tough moments and the clutches. Where's the Scott Brosiuses? Where's the Derek Jeters of the world anymore? We get these guys that are paid millions upon millions of dollars to go 0 for 3 in the postseason, and they go down with their bats on their shoulders every single postseason. It drives me crazy.
You have more championships than I have playoff games played. So shush.
Scotty Brocious is a good deep cut. I was going to say we need some Chuck Knobloch action. We need a guy who sounds like a Star Wars character. Knobloch.
Tune into Agents of
Field. Knobloch.
Tune into Agents of Field here on the Nerd Life Network if you want more sports talk. There even was a Star Wars episode where Mark and I guest hosted to draft Star Wars characters to play sports, and we're going to do the same thing this Wednesday here live on the Nerd Life Network with MCU characters.
Hell, I'll take Wade Boggs on a space horse at this point. I'll do anything.
On that note, quick reminder that if you like what you're hearing, sports and Star Wars and all, hit that like button, subscribe, share with your friends, help us build out the audience for this podcast. Gents, before we dive into episode 4 of Obi Wan Kenobi, last week we spent almost half of our episode talking about everything that came out of Celebration, all of the upcoming Star Wars shows. We missed the single biggest, most important piece of news that came out of all of this. Our namesake is coming back to the Star Wars universe. Babu Frick is set to make an appearance in The Mandalorian next season. How did we frickin' miss that?
Hey, man, it was just hard to remember.
Hey, couldn't have said it better.
We've got him on retainer. Babu can be pulled up at any given point.
Dude,
other sound bites, but Babu's right there on the soundboard.
So does Babu get shorter 30 years earlier? Does the mustache get longer? Does the mustache go away? What do we think Babu Frick looks like 30 years earlier in the timeline?
I mean, I think you've seen it, haven't you? I think he looks exactly the same.
Touche.
Maybe he has a goatee 30 years earlier, like I did several weeks ago.
The question is, do they go to Kijimi, or is Babu Frick traveling the galaxy? That's what I'm most interested in, because Kijimi seems like a lot of fun, and it's kind of in the outer rim where there's not a lot of law, even though in Rise of Skywalker there is a lot of stormtroopers.
Maybe he's a runner of spice at that point. Babu Frick, spice runner of spice.
Well, there's also the fact that that's not Babu Frick's homeworld. So there's an entire there's a whole planet out there with little
fricks,
little frickin' people, and we gotta wonder, like, do they all talk like that? Like, is it just gonna be like a cacophony of hey heys?
Is droid go blank blank?
I want to go to that. I want to go to that frickin' planet.
Yeah, I want to go to there. So, guys, let's talk about episode 4. We didn't get to talk much about the Fortress Inquisitorius, which is, speaking of frickin' things, that is frickin' impossible to say. The Fortress Inquisitorius on Nur in the Mustafar system. If you're not a Star Wars fan, you would wonder what the heck I just said.
Dude, could you say that again? Could you say that again? That entire.
We're going to the Fortress Inquisitorius on Nur and the Mustafar system.
That is amazing.
That and
on a T-shirt.
That is, it's you need to be like one of those and T-shirts. It's like Fortress and Inquisitorius and Nur and Mustafar and Vader. So we got to see the home base of the Inquisitors, and we got to go really in depth into it this past week as Obi Wan Kenobi led a secret attack, a rescue mission to get Leia back, and there were a whole bunch of really interesting things that happened, including a couple of really big Mudhorn eggs we should probably start with. Brian, fire up the Jawas. So, guys, first thing that's I found it to be pretty kind of grotesque and shocking was that there is an entire Jedi tomb held within the Fortress Inquisitorius, where we saw an entire row of Jedis suspended in, I mean, it almost looks like the mosquito entrapped in amber in Jurassic Park. And that was really morbid, and it was all sorts of alien races of Jedis. There was a youngling. What did you guys think of the Jedi tomb?
Not just any youngling. It's the youngling next to Reva at the beginning of the show. So I would assume we're going to get some sort of flashback to how Reva is discovered during Order 66, and does she have to take him out, or who takes him out? That's not a coincidence by any stretch. So the tomb was freaky. Like you said, it was very much, I think we all had the same thought at the same time of it looks like the mosquito at the top of John Hammond's cane from Jurassic Park. What are they doing there with that? But I'm going to say this a lot. I don't think we saw anything groundbreaking in this entire episode. I think everything in this episode we've seen in Star Wars before. This time we saw it in the 4th episode of season 2 of Mandalorian, where we're getting hints as to where Snoke is coming from. I mean, this is a little bit different, but for the most part, everything in this episode we've seen before, and that's kind of my complaint about the episode in general. But this was haunting, like you said.
Yeah,
Mark, what was your take?
Listen, the only thing I thought in that moment was like occasionally Jedis break free. Jedis expand to new territories, painfully, perhaps even dangerously, but Jedis find a way.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ones that was probably most shocking for
Brian can't. He can't even hold it together. Mike was like deadpan. He was like, "Yeah, okay, Ian Malcolm, we're gonna I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, when the Jedis come back to life, they don't eat the passengers. So
in all seriousness, when I'm not quoting the great Ian Malcolm, I had no clue what was going on. My mind really did. All joking aside, my mind went right to John Hammond and like Jurassic Park. It didn't look like they were dead, but in stasis. And so, I mean, knowing what we know about the cloning and the dark science and everything that's going on in the lead up to the Empire, and then what continues past the death of the Empire, it looks like this is a midichlorian gathering site, or that these are test subjects that you're looking at for some kind of experimentation and force experimentation that's going to be going on in the Empire. So it's crazy to see the way that they're expanding on this narrative. Like we've seen it in The Mandalorian, right? We've seen those tanks with everyone saying Snoke-esque clones. We don't know. We really don't know at this point. You get Snoke's theme, but it's so interesting to see that like this isn't doubling down, it's not tripling down. Mike, much to your chagrin, like they're going all out with whatever that narrative is that they went with in The Rise of Skywalker. Like they're running with it, brother.
Well, I'm fine with that. I mean, we talked about that a lot when we were talking about the Bad Batch and how they bring the Kaminoan cloners through. I took it less as that was part of the cloning program and that those are more trophies. I especially
that's what I thought.
Especially given that, and this was something that I didn't recognize the first time around, but I read about it later and went back to look. If you look carefully around the border of the Inquisitor conference room,
yep,
there are slain Jedi's lightsabers used as ornamentation around the whole room. It feels like that's a trophy case. And the big Mudhorn egg of all of them, although that was a really good one that you called out there, Brian, that's one of the younglings from the beginning of the series. Terra Sinube is there encased in the amber. He was featured prominently in the Clone Wars series. He is like Yoda. He is an ancient Jedi who served all the way back into the High Republic. He plays prominently in an episode where he helps to recover Ahsoka's stolen lightsaber.
Mm-hmm.
That was a bit of a gut shot for anybody who was a Clone Wars fan. I mean, Brian, how did you feel seeing? Well, both of you guys are big Clone Wars fans. How did you feel seeing Master Sinube?
I mean, in my opinion, I preferred that versus the whole name drop of Quinlan Vos, and then the entire Star Wars fan base of being upset that Quinlan Vos didn't show up, which is the weirdest thing to me, that people are all upset about this Jedi they completely forgot about. So, I mean, I see it more of an Easter egg than anything, like you said. But I mean, it's kind of a bummer that Ahsoka has an ally out there that's no longer out there to help her.
I also I was a little freaked out by the box hat guy. He looks like those weird, overly stylish, gaunt looking folks who work for the Emperor that we see in Return of the Jedi. Interesting fashion choice. It's very spooky, encased in amber. There was also, this was pretty interesting, there was that big Hulk looking Jedi who was wearing clone trooper armor. The stories behind each of these are kind of fascinating and kind of creepy. You know, again, very maudlin, but you wonder like what was the moment where any of these Jedis were taken.
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't think we're probably going to get answers to that. It looks like they're just scenery for the most part.
Yeah, but an interesting piece of the tapestry nonetheless. You know, the other really big mudhorn egg, you know, within the fortress was Obi Wan taking on two stormtroopers in the dark in order to rescue Leia. This is an action scene that is taken directly from one of the Star Wars video games, where Starkiller, you know, does the exact same thing, taking on a couple more guys in, you know, probably a bit flashier fashion. But the Force Unleashed had that moment, and there are a couple of other there, you know, between the Force Unleashed and what's the other recent game,
Fallen
Brian?
Order.
And and Fallen Order, like most of what we've gotten from the Fortress has been in video game form, and it's kind of like they canonized it here. You guys have played the games. How did you feel seeing that? Did it give you a tingle?
Brian and I had this exact discussion, I don't know, 2 days ago over the phone. So Brian, like you've played the games probably more than I have. I played Fallen Order one time. I had one playthrough, but this episode is pretty much the entire story arc from that game. And that's what they did. Essentially, they canonized Fallen Order here in the 4th episode.
Well, I mean, but my problem with that is, one, Fallen Order already is canonized. That's something that is part of Star Wars canon, so the story, quote unquote, counts.
Yep.
I mean, didn't take the full storyline, but yeah, I took like the last everything about the Jedi, or excuse me, everything about infiltrating the Fortress Inquisitorius on Nur in the Mustafar system,
Yes.
was straight out of Fallen Order, all of it. And I don't expect all Star Wars fans to have consumed this property. That's part of it too. I totally understand that. But you've given me this story, and now Obi-Wan is doing everything all the way down to coming up into the bottom after somebody opens it up from the inside. One of the Jedi that's encased in amber looked like Seer, which is the main Jedi lady from Fallen Order, but Fallen Order takes place after this, so it can't be her. So it must have just been a nod and everything. But all the way down to the glass breaking and the water coming in and flooding the hallway, all of it happened in Fallen Order. All of it. And that kind of frustrates me a little bit.
So you don't think, as George Lucas would say, you don't think it's something that rhymes in the Star Wars universe, or does it rhyme, or is it lazy?
I wouldn't go as far to say lazy, but it's bringing something that was such good storytelling within video game fashion and trying to give it a new spin with a character that you're going to, one, see, and two, be familiar with. But I'm really interested in the character of Cal Kestis, and I've talked about it many times on this show that I hope to see a live action version at some point. But I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say lazy, but I don't think it rhymes either, because it's identical.
I think
the same.
Despite the fact, and again, you're right, that these games, many of these games and some of these intellectual properties are canon. We talked about the Darth Vader Charles Soule books, and like we actually got pretty heated on another podcast with someone who was telling us that, you know, of something that wasn't canon. And when we were citing those, we were saying, but it is true, like this is canon, and it got a little bit heated in that exchange. I really think what they're doing is, Brian just said, a lot of people don't consume that video game. So what they're doing is bringing the story into live universe. And for those people that do consume all of it, it's not a slap in the face, but it can seem lazy. It's like, this all has been done before. But these films and these shows are for the general public. And let's face it, we've talked about this facet, is there's a lot of people that are diehard Star Wars fans that have not consumed Rebels. They have not consumed Clone Wars, and they won't, just because to them, they very much consider Star Wars canon to be and to only exist in the live action universe. So I think the writers know that to some extent, of the mainstream fans This is where they come for canon. They're not going to think outside the box in that regard. So this is a story that we absolutely love. So let's bring it into the live action so that the mainstream fan can connect with it. And it's a great storyline. Philosophically, like you could get mad or say like, this is really lazy, or I'm trying to be understanding and realize that not everyone's love of Star Wars runs as deep as say like the three of us. And so I can appreciate why they're doing it and what, what their angle is as to why they're using these story arcs, or let's just say, dare we say, recycling them again.
But if it was just Fallen Order, then I'd be willing to forgive it. But we're going to talk more about how it's not just Fallen Order.
Yeah, I haven't played those. I haven't played those games. I mean, I've watched scenes from them, and I know about them. But having not played them before, I enjoyed Obi-Wan holding back the glass. I enjoyed the scene in the dark. I think there's some other things that they could have done a little bit more interestingly. If we're being constructively critical, like I don't know, something just felt off about the action in this episode. Like it was really good, but it didn't have the same tension that and it's the same director. Deborah Chow does a brilliant job in how she builds the tension in the rescue episode, in episode 3 of Mandalorian, when Mando goes back and rescues Grogu from the client. That is a high tension and actually really violent episode. He burns a stormtrooper, he unleashes the whistling birds. It's pretty gnarly, and I didn't feel like, and I don't need Obi-Wan to be vicious, we've got Vader to do that, but I felt like it could have been a little bit, I don't know, it could have been a little bit more tense in terms of how he was going to get through there. It didn't even feel like, for me, like, I know this is crazy, I felt more on edge with Obi and Leia sitting in the back of Frank the Mole Man's truck than I did with him wandering the hallways of the fortress.
And if we're going to talk, I think this is where we were talking before we came on air. It's not as good as The Mandalorian. I think all three of us can agree with that statement. I think I'm going to be the far more negative one when it comes to part 4 specifically. I really like part 1 and 2. We talked last week. I liked a lot of part 3. Part 4, I'm really struggling with. But I think this is where you can see, even from just the way everything is acted, I think you can really see the difference between green and blue screen versus filming in the volume. I think there's a massive difference between how the characters are interacting with their surroundings than we're getting, because when they're on that platform in the Fortress Inquisitorius on Nur in the Mustafar system, the snow speeders, the what are they, T-47s?
Yeah.
So cool to have them back.
It's so cool to have them back, but that part where Wade, who they want me to care about that I just don't care about, is firing lasers at Reva, and from the vantage point, it looks like he's like 6 feet away from her. Like, it was not believable for me. And I think in the volume, I think Reva's a lot more ingrained into what that scene looks like, rather than just acting by herself in the middle of a blue wall. And I think that some of that is jumping off the screen to me personally. Mark, it looks like you disagree.
That's heartless, Brian. I mean, Wade is somebody's goose. I mean, that's heartless of you, man. I think
I messaged you guys when I first saw Wade pop up on screen. I thought Wade was the death stick dealer from episode 2.
Who went
I looked him up. I was praying that was him, because what a great Mudhorn egg, and what a great payoff that would have been if Obi-Wan had mind tricked him into rethinking his life, and rethinking his life turned out that he actually was saving younglings and force sensitive people by carrying them through the path. That would have been such the payoff.
Inquisitorius on the planet Nur on Mustafar, in the Mustafar
system. Yeah,
that would have been the long play for Obi-Wan.
But do you guys at least agree with me when it comes to the volume versus the blue screen? Like, or am I
didn't know they weren't shooting on the volume. I thought they were shooting on the volume for that.
I thought they were too, until I saw a bunch of behind the scenes stuff this week, and I don't think they touched the volume at all. And it's that one scene, not removing how silly it was that we're just going to cover Leia in the side of a jacket and have 4 legs and nobody's going to notice. But
they did Muppet Man.
Yeah, it was total Muppet Man. But I saw some behind the scenes stuff, and it's not the volume. And that's where I noticed it the most. Maybe some of it was, but to my understanding and the research that I did, I don't think they used it.
We got to look into that, gentlemen, because I was under the impression that anything that was being produced for Star Wars these days was on the volume.
That's what I thought too. Maybe Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania was hogging it.
Well, it did. So it did stand out. Now that you bring that out and you bring up that point, it did stand out. To a bigger point, I think of the three of us, I'm probably the highest on the 4th episode. And I talked to Brian from this standpoint. I think with the 4th installment of these 6-episode series, I've set my bar so low for the 4th episode because pacing on every show, whether it's a Marvel or Star Wars show, I always feel like that 4th episode is a huge letdown. I feel like they never know what to do before they start to wrap things with the penultimate and then the finale. The 4th episodes have always been a throwaway for me. So I liked the fact that there were some stakes with this one. I was more interested. Again, we know what's going to happen with Leia. We know what's going to happen with Obi-Wan. So there's no stakes there. It's just really heartwarming stuff to see the two of them bond. When he holds her hand at the end, I did shed a tear a little bit and realizing again how important he is to her life. But like Tala to me is the more important story here. And I'm really getting into these ancillary characters. Like I was all in for like what's going to happen to Tala, what's going to happen to the Path. I'm loving Moses Ingram. I'm loving her character. I'm getting more intrigued by what game is she playing, because I mean they want us to believe that she's this big bad, but I can't help but feel that there's some turn that is there for her, that I can't believe that she's going to continue with this path as an inquisitor. I think that she's the one that we're going to be focused on. And the rumor is, there was a huge rumor that was dropped this week. Brian and I kind of kicked the tires on it. There's been early reports that because of the success of the series, they've actually redone some of the finale for a future project with Obi-Wan. Not that it's an Obi Wan Kenobi season 2. This was supposed to be a limited series, but that Lucasfilm has started to kick the tires on something based in this series or in an Obi-Wan series, that this may not be the last time that we see one and or many of these characters in a future story. And all signs are pointing towards Moses coming back in another project as this character. So to that end, like I liked this episode and I'm very interested, not as much in what Obi-Wan is doing and Leia is doing at this point in the series, but what's going to happen to these other characters that I'm starting to invest time and energy into.
Well, I liked it. I think that I think there are things that could have been better about it, but there's a whole heck of a lot of that I liked. And I think let's pick up on one of them that you talked about, which is I like that they're starting to define the path a little bit. I don't know that the path and the rebellion are even necessarily the same thing, which is exciting to me. Like I like the idea that there's an entire narrative thread that goes on amid the era of the Empire, where there's an entire networked organization that may or may not be connected with Mon Mothma and the rebellion, that sole purpose is to protect and shuttle force sensitive people throughout the galaxy to protect them. And so we've got Tala, and we got O'Shea Jackson finally made his debut as Roken, who is the grumpy engineer who works on the path. Very interesting that, I find this very interesting. I'd love to get your take on this, guys. So we have a classic hologram planning session when they plan the attack on the fortress. They're all rallying because they want to rescue Leia. And this is an organization that is focused on protecting force sensitive people. And yet it feels like Roken doesn't want anything to do with Obi-Wan. And they are very bitter with Obi-Wan when they lose Wade in service of the cause. And it kind of strikes me a bit weird. It's like, on the one hand, this is a really interesting crew because they're selflessly trying to protect the Jedi, but then by the same token, you have maybe one of the greatest Jedi ever, and here he's trying to do something, and they're kind of throwing shade at him that he's somehow hurting their cause. What do you guys think about the organization of the path and how they are either with Obi or kind of at odds with Obi and just kind of helping him out of almost like feeling like they're obligated to?
Well, outside of potentially why Reva may hate him so much because she felt abandoned by the Jedi and the message that he left, we've seen Obi-Wan at least turn down one Jedi that was reaching out to him to be the old Obi-Wan again. And he said, it's over, I'm done. We don't know how many other Jedi have reached. This could have been the path reaching out to Obi-Wan for 10 years. And now all of a sudden he cares because there's a kid involved when he left him high and dry for 10 whole years. I would assume there'd be some resentment there for sure.
I would expand that, Brian. I think you're dead on with that assessment. I don't think it's just Obi-Wan. I think that there's so many people in the galaxy that are upset with the Jedi when they were needed the most. They abandoned and they kind of fled and they're hiding and they're self-preserving at this point. Like when people are crying out in the universe for a hero to rise up, where are they? They're scattered, they're disorganized, they're hiding in the shadows, they're trying to do anything to preserve their own lives. I would say that there's just a lot of frustration on a part of specifically those who want to fight and the rebels, that like here are supposed to be the defenders of the Republic, and where are they? They're nowhere to be found. And the fact that they are made aware of, like, Obi-Wan is alive. The great Obi Wan Kenobi, once the defender of the Republic, one of its most prominent generals, has been in hiding, and here he stands in front of me in the flesh. Like, I can understand to that end why they're so frustrated with these supposed peacekeepers for having bailed at the moment when they were needed the most to face the Sith and to face this oppressive empire. And I get it. Like, it makes a lot of sense.
So you think it's more General Jedi and not him specifically? Because we know Quinlan is at least involved. We know some Jedi are involved. I felt it to be more targeted specifically to Obi-Wan than to the Jedi in general.
I think because he's standing there at that moment and because of his reputation, I think they're taking out that frustration on him in the moment.
Fair enough.
I don't think it's anything specific with his personality other than the fact of, as powerful as you once were, as prominent and as visible as you once were, it's almost like where have you been? We needed you. Like, why are you here now? We needed you 10 years ago, Obi-Wan, and now you're here. Now you need my help. We've needed your help for how long? That's how I read that kind of stuff. And it would make a whole heck of a lot of sense in terms of the narrative of what's been going on in the last decade.
I did think it was a little silly that O'Shea Jackson Jr. just kind of talked it out to himself. Like, I'm not going to help you. Well, you don't know what the Empire can do. Yeah, I do know what the Empire can do, so I will help you. It was like, that didn't really work for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you guys bring up an interesting point, and Reva uses it in the first episode when she's hunting she's hunting Obi-Wan and hunting Jedi on Tatooine. She's like, the Jedi abandon you. Where are they? They're not here to protect you. Which is not really the truth. You know, it's maybe for Obi-Wan and that he's been in hiding, but for everybody, they don't have the perspective to know that, you know, they don't know that the Emperor is a Sith. They just know he's the Emperor. They don't know what he is,
or that Vader is Anakin. Like, nobody knows this information.
No, nobody knows what that is. You know, they know that they've been promised, you know, after they've all been told that the Jedi, you know, rose up against democracy and the Emperor. You know, it's like a false flag against the Jedi. So yeah, it's incredibly convoluted and interesting in a way that I don't think we ever realized before, where it used to just be Vader hunted them down, right?
Yeah.
Like, it was Order 66, Vader hunted them down, nobody remembers who they are. The idea that there's this weird gray area where, you know, people are either distrusting of the Jedi or don't even like them, you know, in this whole process, like, that's just something, you know, you don't even think of, especially because by the time you get to Rey, and everybody goes, wait a minute, the Jedi are real. They're like, we need the Jedi back. We need Luke back. They had, it's like they didn't have ice cream for 50 years. And then suddenly they had ice cream for 20 years, and then they can't live without ice cream again.
To that end, when you pick up in A New Hope, you even see characters like Han, hokey religions, and they're almost slamming the Force.
There's no energy field that controls my destiny.
There's no energy field that controls my destiny. But when you think about where all of this is playing out, the Inquisitors and Vader, it's not playing out on a grander scale. It's not playing out in the overall and overarching war of the rebellion. Like there's a lot of layers to this conflict, and this is just one sub layer of all of that's going on. Like the Inquisitors and Vader and this hunt, it's not really happening on the surface, and it's really not a part of the grander scheme of what's going on. Like lest we forget, like Tarkin is running this. Thrawn is running this. The Emperor is working on a whole different plane politically, and in dissolving the Senate. All of this is kind of happening without the general public or even any of those other political machinations. So, like this is
Senate's not even dissolved yet.
Yeah, I mean, this is adding, I think, a lot of layers to this period, and it's really interesting because for a while we didn't have this story, and we had to speculate as to what happened in this period between the Clone Wars and the start of A New Hope. Now we're starting to get those answers, and we're starting to see all those subtleties, and it's adding a lot of really creative flashes to not just the political landscape, but just the general mood and the tempo of what is it like, throughout the galaxy in this turbulent period before the rise of the Empire.
So Obi-Wan, the real arc of this episode is how Obi-Wan got his groove back. So Obi-Wan starts to find his mojo in this episode. It starts out at the beginning. He's trying to move something with the Force, not very successfully. And by the end, he's wielding his lightsaber with real form again. He is using the Force to distract stormtroopers. As we've mentioned a little while ago, he's actually stopping the Force of a leak in the fortress by using the Force, and then uses the Force to redirect the water to drown a battalion of stormtroopers. What did you guys think about getting the return to form of Obi-Wan, including getting, this was for the episode 1 and 2 geeks and all of us, using his little underwater breathing apparatus, swimming to get in, and then coming up, looking like a damp rag. But he's not the Jedi he once was, but he's getting dangerous again, boys.
He uses his blaster too much. It's so uncivilized. Like out on that particular platform when they're escaping and everybody knows it's him, he should be using his lightsaber, and he didn't, and it bothered me. But yes, he's getting his groove back, and I think we're going to get a full-blown like episode 3 Revenge of the Sith level lightsaber fight before this is over. And I need it. But like I said, he should be running with his lightsaber out. He shouldn't be using those uncivilized weapons.
I like the callback to him using the Force to create a sound and a distraction. Very episode 4. That was a smaller Easter egg, but I really enjoyed that. Here's my only problem is at this point, and this is where I just hate these 6-episode arcs and series. For him to get back to that level by the finale, to have that duel that I think we're all expecting and hoping, it's just very rushed, and I don't see how any of that happens without some full-blown Rocky IV montage of him training in the Force with like Qui-Gon Jinn. I don't know.
Well, you already called it. You called it last episode. You said, he's going to go back to the corner. He's going to get a pep talk from Mick, which is of course going to be Qui-Gon, and we're going to hear the training montage music. We'll get the loud Liberty Bell gong, just like in Rocky.
Hearts on Fire has to. There's got to be hearts on fire at some point, because
he's going to run the steps of the Yavin Temple just like he's running the Philadelphia Museum steps. He's going to get the top, throw his arms up in the air.
Vader!
Vader!
But Mark brought something up earlier that I want to get your guys' takes on, and I hope Lucasfilm isn't so fickle and so flying by the seat of their pants that, oh, this is a successful show that we knew was going to be a massively successful show since it was before it was announced, that we knew everybody wanted this character again, that now they're deciding, oh, we're going to continue this. We're going to put this deleted scene in the episode or into the finale so we can spin off. Like, I don't want Lucasfilm to be flying by the seat of their pants so much that, oh, this is really good, let's make more of it, rather than have this planned out and ready to go.
Okay, so here's my theory, though, and I want to throw this out there. Some of it may not be that. Some of it may also be Ewan McGregor seeing the reaction, seeing Hayden Christensen being so interested. Some of this may hinge on him and his willingness to continue to not only act in, but potentially produce. Lest we forget, guys, he has a producer credit on the show as well. We don't know what happens backstage. He might have gone to Kathleen Kennedy and said, hey, listen, I know I said I was only going to do 6, but I'm really digging this. Do you know if there is an opportunity for me to come back and do more of this? That might be very much at play here too, Brian. It might be Ewan McGregor coming back to Lucasfilm and Kennedy and saying, this has been so much fun. I don't know if I'm done with 6. That's what I think.
Maybe.
I don't know if it's them flying by the seat of their pants, in as much as it might just be the talent that's attached to this project saying, I'm not done. I've done 6 and I want more. It's like Brett Favre syndrome. I want more.
Yeah. I don't know how much more I want, though, guys. I mean, like, I want it. Don't get me wrong. I always want it, right? But by the same token, I want it to stay special.
I want
it to somehow stay special, and I want them to be thoughtful about it, to the point you guys are making about, like, let's not tack things on and get greedy because we see dollar signs. Like, they took their time. It's to go back full circle to the top of the episode. The reason that Top Gun Maverick was so good is they took their time to tell the right story and be authentic. The reason that Mandalorian has been so good is that they've taken their time and they've really put themselves into making something strong. I feel like they did that with this. Are there things that maybe are not hitting as hard for us? Maybe, but I think they did the right thing in how they put the Obi Wan series together, and I think they've done it with great care, and they've been very thoughtful. And Ewan wouldn't have come back if it wasn't the right thing. I want them to be at least that thoughtful with anything they might do coming out of this.
See, but I think they've already shattered the glass ceiling. That now that we know that not only is there a meeting between he and Anakin, or he and Vader in between A New Hope, why not just run with it at this point? Because Vader knows he's alive. Vader knows that he's there. They're like, we've kind of thrown that away. There's a lot of story for me to believe that there's, another 15 or 16 years where he just goes and lives on like some dilapidated moisture farm, especially now after re-engaging and being reinvigorated by this quest for Leia, him rediscovering his force powers and his force sensitivity. Now it becomes almost more implausible for him to just go back to that semi-monastic life and doing nothing for another decade and a half until Luke has come of age. I think there's a real space for storytelling, maybe not in the same arc of him taking on some role in the battle between the Empire and the Rebellion, but there's a lot of other story that can be told. Unless we forget, we also know that there is a point there that he will duel against Darth Maul, and he's going to get to a point where he ends Maul in a single stroke. So there's a lot of story, in my opinion, that can still be told. And if you haven't engaged Ewan McGregor and you haven't interested Lucasfilm, I'm in. Like, I'll watch it.
Yeah, I don't know. It begins to strain the credulity of so much of what's in the original films the more you push on it. Like, we've already talked about in other episodes about, how they're going to reconcile some of the actions that, some of the things that happen in this series and things that have been said with things that are established later on. the most obvious being, Ben and Leia. Um, I find it hard to believe that if he's been able to stay successfully hidden for a decade and then he's going to now suddenly just pop out, you don't think Vader's going to figure out Tatooine over the course of the next 10 years if he keeps showing himself? I feel like, it's like, it's like Kaiser Soze in the Usual Suspects. You really think the devil pops his head out, and then gives you another chance to catch him, and like that,
he's gone.
He's gone. I love what you're describing, Mark, but I struggle with how they can continue to reconcile that, as opposed to he's reinvigorated, and at the end of this, he comes out recognizing that, no, I need to be fully committed to making sure that Luke and Leia are ready to be able to take on the Empire.
I don't know the answer. I'm more with Mike. If you're going to give it to me, I will consume it and I will break it down here on Babu's freaking podcast. But I don't think it's something I necessarily want.
So if it's done right, like Mike said, I think it can be done, but that's everything. It has to be done the right way.
But I still don't know. Obviously, these last two are going to make the difference. I'm 50-50 on the show right now if it's been done, quote unquote, right. I really don't know yet. I haven't even made that decision yet. So we'll see where we're at in 2 more episodes.
Well, to the greater point too, I think a lot of us fans thought that this show was going to go in a very different place than what it has. I don't think any of us foresaw that this was going to be him trying to save and protect Leia. I think they very much sold this as him trying to keep Luke's identity secret and trying to stay out of the grasp and the reaches of the Inquisitors. And like, he's been playing into their hand almost the entire time in this series. I mean, he's been on the radar since episode 2. And not to clap back at the fans, but I think there's been a lot of dissatisfaction with some fans as to where the story went versus what they wanted and expected. Like, we don't get to write Star Wars,
No, and I'm not trying to.
No, I know that. I'm not saying that, but like, we don't get to write Star Wars. I don't get paid to do any of this, and I consume it. I gave up being a critic with a lot of this stuff a while ago and just started to enjoy it. Like, I think I hung my spurs up. Mike will probably tell you this. I think I hung my spurs up with The Last Jedi, and I've spent a great part of the last 5 years trying to come around on that and atone for my sins and being a part of that toxic fandom, because I think that at some point I did join them full force. Like, I went to the dark side and thought for a hot minute that I could write or pen the Star Wars universe better than guys like Rian Johnson, or, guys that were doing this for a living and were actually getting paid by Lucasfilm to do it. And the thing is like, I've given up on that, and I very much try to find a way to make whatever that canon is work and try to find, a silver lining to it, even if it doesn't go with me. So for me to come out and say, that I would never be in on another Obi Wan Kenobi installment, is probably at this point and where I am with my love of Star Wars, it's just wholly untrue. If Deborah Chow and Ewan McGregor can find a screenwriter to find some nuanced story that works within the canon and the existing structure of episode 4, gets me to somewhere where he's fighting with Maul in the desert and gives me some other story that old Ben can stay off the radar. Like, yes, like, let's do this. I love Ewan McGregor so much in this role. I think I will be sad, depressed if these are the last 2 moments that I have to spend with him. And if I'm being honest, I think I selfishly want more, if only for that reason. I don't know if I can say goodbye. It's like Mike said, ice cream. I've gone how long without ice cream, and now I got ice cream again, and I don't want to go without ice cream anymore.
I even wonder, kind of putting on the fanfic hat for a section for a second here. We've talked about the path and, all of the stories that can be told there, and the fact that, Obi-Wan has been disengaged. What if Obi-Wan was like Charlie and Charlie's Angels? Like, what if somehow he ends up being the guide that it's like, look, we think
Yeah.
we found
Yes.
this Jedi, or we have this issue. Obi-Wan, what do we do? Like, it doesn't have to be about Obi-Wan for Obi-Wan to be involved. He can be like, he can be like the voice coming out of the box in Charlie's Angels, or he can be the voice in the tape that's about to self-destruct in Mission Impossible. And every episode can start off with "Hello there," and he can drive you into this is where you're going this week, and this is what you need to do.
Well, he could be Captain America on the moon for all I care. The path brings up a very interesting narrative and a very interesting arc that we can continue to explore. For so long, we've thought that the Jedi were extinguished, when now we know that that is not the case at all, that they're just scattered throughout the galaxy, that they're laying low, that what we thought originally that it was a singular line, their light is all but is extinguished from the universe, from Tarkin. No, that in fact was not true. There was the light. It just they weren't shining it so that anyone else could see it.
No, I don't know. I don't know, Mark. I mean, there's still 10 years. There's an additional 10 years that Darth Vader and the Inquisitors are out there killing people. So there may be force sensitive folks that are out there and hiding, but when Yoda says, in Return of the Jedi, when I'm gone, the last of the Jedi will you be? Like, there's still 10 years. I mean, that's another interesting way to go with it. If there was going to be another carrying on, is you could either make a series that's kind of like The Fugitive, or like the Hulk, where you spend it's the constant cat and mouse with Vader and Obi-Wan, or it would also be kind of an interesting narrative if the whole thing was Obi-Wan in the path continually trying to keep people away from the Inquisitors. That could be an entire series as well.
Yeah, but even Yoda's logic was inherently flawed, because now we know to be true is that Ahsoka was still alive. Like, Ahsoka,
she's not a Jedi.
She's not, but from a certain point of view. So to me now, knowing what I know, like, guys, this is great. This is what I love about this show. Now, knowing what we know, what Yoda, I think, is saying are people that are practitioners of whatever that strict code of conduct was. There are Jedi out there. There really are. There's Force users, and there's very powerful ones. But like the concept of the Last Jedi, I think we could have an entire episode just breaking down how misleading that titling is, because there's so many people within the universe that are Force sensitive, and dare I would say are very powerful Force users, ones that can probably rival the Sith or the Inquisitors, but they're not practitioners, and they're not a part of this grand political scheme that's going on, and they just don't want to be involved in the conflict. Like, Ahsoka could have asserted herself, she just didn't.
Yeah, but that's the point. Yeah, they're not engaged to be Jedi Knights. Grogu buries his training deep, and is nothing but a cooing child for however many years that is. Ahsoka is off who knows where looking for Ezra, who is also has the potential to be a Jedi and is not engaged. So I really think that there's a whole lot more wiping out that happens over the course of the next decade. I think that for as much as there's been a reign of terror from the Inquisitors over the decade getting up to Obi-Wan, that there's a whole lot more atrocity there's a whole other decade where they're just and where the Empire really gets even worse. I mean, right now we're just starting to see, they're debating, and we're going to see it in Andor. They're like debating, is the Empire good? Is the Empire bad? 10 years from now, we know the Empire is bloody awful. And then to your point from earlier, they dissolve the Senate and it's a total autocracy.
And then they blow up Alderaan as the cherry on top. I mean,
yeah, after they've destroyed Jeddah, after they've totally stripped every planet of its resources, there's a lot of bad stuff set to go down over the next decade.
Well, maybe it's not an Obi-Wan narrative that we get. Maybe there is a degree of truth to this rumor that we're getting more Obi-Wan, but perhaps Reva is going to be a part of. I mean, Brian would probably be here for this. Like, we talk about the Charles Soule novels constantly, and how much of the Charles Soule novels revolve around Darth Vader hunting down and destroying various Jedi and getting into duels. And I would be there for that. Like, hey, you want to bring back Hayden Christensen and you want to bring back Revo, or you want to, there's a lot of history that's still there in this next 10 to 15 years before we pick up with A New Hope that I would be happy to visit. And I think that this is perhaps one of the most compelling time periods in all of the Skywalker saga. Like this is a really compelling time period, if only because of how powerful and evil Vader is in this time period. Great villains are fun to watch.
I don't think Reva survives. I'm sorry, Brian. I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just gonna say I don't think Reva makes it out, and I think we need to. Before we get through this, we have to talk about that scene as well. I mean, Vader storms down the hallway, lifts her in the air, starts force choking her, and she uses a Vader trick. She's planted a homing beacon with Leia by reprogramming Lola. If Obi-Wan doesn't kill her by the end of the season, Vader's going to kill her. And if Vader doesn't kill her, my money is still on the Grand Inquisitor coming back and he's going to kill her. I cannot imagine she's going to survive past episode 6. Sorry, Brian, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Mark, you talk about how this is the prime spot for storytelling. I'm the opposite. I want to explore post Return of the Jedi Mandalorian time frame more than I do between 3 and 4 personally. But anyway, yeah, like I was telling you before we went on, Mike, that I had some challenges with this episode of there's nothing that we had never seen before. And I said, Reva might as well just simply told Vader that she's got him tied to the end of a string, because that's exactly what happened. It was General Hux telling Snoke that they've got the ability to track them through lightspeed. She's got the ability to track Leia and Obi-Wan through Lola. And I don't know. Like I think eventually Obi-Wan's going to have to go to this cave and have that rocky moment with Qui-Gon, but he's going to be being tracked the entire time, which is going to be the entire thing looming over the entire episode.
Brian, question for you. At this point in time, they're on a starship. Why the heck wouldn't he just fly back to Alderaan and drop her off with the droid? It just makes so much more sense. Like, where else would you go at this point?
It's a good question. I really don't know. And that's why I'm saying the jury is, I have already given up hope that this is going to surpass The Mandalorian for me, but that is the highest of high bars. I don't think that this show can attain that. I still think I'm enjoying this show a bit more than I did, except for maybe 2 episodes of the Book of Boba Fett. But for me, I had such high expectations for the show, and part of that is completely my fault. I'll fully admit that. They did go in a way that I didn't think they were going to go. I'm not naive enough or stupid enough to think I could have done better. I'm not at all saying that. I actually really like the entire Princess Leia swerve. But that being said, there's just so much logic that escapes some of this stuff. And that was part of the reason why I didn't like anything Robert Rodriguez did in the Book of Boba Fett, because sometimes logic just went out the window. There's been a few things like you just talked about. At some point, we got to get this 10-year-old out of danger. Taking her back to Alderaan probably does put her back into danger, because then everybody would know where she is. So that's the argument against it. But there's sometimes logic is just, again, trying to escape by having just a big giant green trench coat with 4 legs out the bottom of it just made no sense to me. So sometimes I'm willing to make that logic leap, and sometimes I'm not. I'm very not consistent when it comes to that, and I'll fully admit that. But
interrogating a 10-year-old girl who has no connection to any of this stuff also didn't make any sense to me.
Well, that scene was an interesting one.
Yeah. Yeah. They're trying to make that connection to the original trilogy that Leia's always been this strong, and that just didn't work for me. That's the connection they were shooting for, and it just didn't land with me.
It's a stretch.
It is what it is.
Here's the thing. Leia was, so here's my problem, and here's where I'm going to jump on your bandwagon and jump on your boat. Leia, for this entire narrative, the purpose of Leia was to draw out Obi-Wan, and to that end, like that has been her only purpose. Now this is a huge stretch for me. She's not connected to anything. Like, she's a 10-year-old kid who was kidnapped to just bring Obi-Wan out from the shadows. There's no purpose for her anymore. Like, having her involved after she's been rescued, there's no reason to have her be a major part of episodes 5 or 6. She should just get dropped off. I know that's not what's going to happen, but
if she had at least given up the path, if this is where she had learned how to be more resilient against their tactics, like I honestly would have been cool with it. But the fact that this 10-year-old can still withstand the probe droid and everything else, I would have been more learning.
Well,
I don't know.
It's the droid didn't get her. You know, they were disrupted.
She just stops everything she was doing. Yeah, that was okay. That's fair. She never got to the droid. That's fair.
Yeah, I don't know. So to take it home, where are we going these last 2 episodes? Because I'm with you, Mark. I mean, I would love if Leia got dropped off on Alderaan, and then there was a whole other arc that had to happen where he gets called. You know, he basically gets called out, and it's, you know, he's got to face Darth Vader. Like there's something where he's got to go back in and engage with them, as opposed to what are they going to kidnap Leia again?
I don't know.
They're going to find the Path planet and take her again, so he has to go back for her a second time. Like, on the one hand, I'm excited of not knowing where it's going, and on the other hand, I'm like, huh?
If I were writing it, after I just said about 5 minutes ago how I'm not going to try to write Star Wars, now I'm going to try to write Star Wars. If I were writing it, he would drop her off at home, and she would gift him this droid as like, thank you for all that you've done. And then he would take the droid back with him to wherever, and then they would find him, just him. But I know that's not what they're going to do. But so that it didn't seem completely like weird and like he should not have her. His entire mandate, his mission was get the girl, save the girl, bring her home. He has her. Why wouldn't he bring her home at this point? Anything else, to me, I'm gonna moan and groan a little bit if he doesn't take her right away to home. So if I wrote it, he would drop her off at Alderaan. She would love him and gift him this droid as something that was important to her. He would give to her she would give to him to say, this is how much you mean to me. And then he would keep it, and they would find him. And then the last 2 episodes would resolve. They're not going to do that. I honestly, like, I have no clue at this point. We have 2 episodes. We have essentially an hour and a half to wrap this. I have no clue where they're going to do.
All that being said, all the negative talk that I've had tonight, I didn't care for O'Shea Jackson Jr. I didn't care for Sully. I didn't care for Wade. I really like Tala. I think she's really interesting. I would love to continue more with that character if she could pop up in Andor or wherever. I think Tala is a really interesting character. I'm with you, Mike. I think Reva's going to meet the end, and I hope it's at the hands of Vader. It very well could be at the hands of Obi-Wan, but I don't see him murdering somebody, for lack of a better term, being the way he gets his groove back for the next 10 years and falling back into the Jedi ways. I want to see Vader. We haven't warranted the return of Hayden Christensen yet. And I think over the next 2 episodes, we will earn Hayden Christensen coming back into this role. And I'm leaning more toward we're gonna get something out of this show, a spinoff of some sort that he's involved in.
There's got to be a surprise of some sort in the last 2 episodes.
Right now it hasn't been warranted. We've seen Hayden Christensen precisely 3 times, twice in the back of the tank, and then 1 time in Obi-Wan's subconscious, basically standing just on the pasture there. So we haven't earned that yet. So I do expect some really good Darth Vader stuff to be coming. I do still expect to see that Rocky moment with Qui-Gon Jinn. Beyond that, I genuinely don't know where it's headed.
If that's going to happen, it's got to happen soon, because
it has to. I mean, if it's like anything else that has happened in a majority of Disney Plus series, Marvel especially, we're headed to the penultimate episode this week, which is going to be the biggest one, the best one with all the most stuff in it, and then setting it up to wrap the final week. So I think we need to earn Hayden Christensen returning to the role. We need to pay off the whole mumbling under his breath, talking to Qui-Gon Jinn. Those are the 2 things that have to happen for me to change my tune, so to speak.
Brian, I so wish that we had more time to discuss this, but what has to happen in order to make the line make sense? When last I left, I was but the learner, now I am the master. What has to happen to make that line make sense? Because it doesn't make sense right now.
Obi-Wan has to own the crap out of Darth Vader, which at this point we haven't seen it. So he has to do something that Vader cannot anticipate, cannot expect. We also need Help Me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, You're My Only Hope. We need something like that to be able to make sense as well. The problem with this story is because you're trying so hard to attach it to the original trilogy, you're actually removing it further from the original trilogy with the more stuff that you do. So I need that to be treated. Not that I don't think they're treating the canon with the utmost respect. Who am I to tell Lucasfilm what their canon is? But there are things that I need them to connect the dots on for me to be happy. And last time we met, I was the learner. Now I'm the master. I know I didn't quote that exactly right, but we need to see Obi-Wan own Darth Vader. And
we have 2 episodes
constituted. We're not gonna see it quite the same way.
And we have 2 episodes to do it. That's my concern. We have 2 episodes to do.
I think if the episodes can be long enough, we're going to get there. They have to. I mean, and
they have no choice.
I think they have no choice. And I think you said it earlier, Mark. Like, I think we need to see. We got one twirl of the lightsaber this episode. Like, Obi's got to get back to full twirling. He's got to point his 2 fingers at the camera the way that he does in episode 3, and the way that he does when he fights Maul in Rebels. We got to get him back,
and
in a serious way.
To that end, again, I'm not being toxic and saying I've loved Leia. I've loved the fact that they injected her. But if you waste any more screen time on that narrative, then you are going to have to take that time from exactly the story arc that we've all just talked about in the last 5 minutes. If there's any more oxygen spent on Leia and getting her back to Alderaan, we are going to be sacrificing from what I think a lot of the fans and the story needs, which is get me to where A New Hope makes sense.
Yeah. And I think, just to put a bow on it, I think there's going to have to be another interaction at the Lars homestead. I don't think we've seen the last of Owen and Beru. Yeah. I don't think that we've seen the last of Obi-Wan trying to reach out to Luke. Remember, the toy speeder was returned to him. I think that's gonna have to pay off. So I'm excited for Wednesday, guys.
So, gentlemen, to go full circle and to go back to where we began, we're going to need 2 miracles. You're going to have to fly over, invert, fire, hit the shaft, exposing it, and then a second missile to penetrate and bust that bunker over in the Ukraine. We need someone to fly this mission.
Ukraine?
Isn't it in Ukraine?
No, it was kind of implied that it was probably like Iran.
Red Star country.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
I had Ukraine on the brain. I don't know.
The dangers of doing things live.
On that note, if you like what you heard, craziness and all, remember, hit that like button, smash that like button, as the kids say, hit the bell, and make sure you come back again next week at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, as we discuss the penultimate episode of Obi Wan Kenobi. And until then, we will leave you, as we always do, by wishing you that may the Force be with you.
Always.
Always.